Hello, hello to everybody. I see there is a good here this time. I'm so happy to see you again. Hello, my name is Maria Vittoria Grassi. If you don't know me, I'm from Italy, and that's where I am right now in the showroom of Grassi Pietre. It's nice to see you again. If it's not your first time, if it's your first time, welcome. Let me just introduce you to Giorgio, who is our man in New Jersey that will lead the conversation today. Giorgio, you're here. And there's Giacomo also, who has been basically the person who has thought a little bit about all this idea of these Palladio talks. Listen, Giorgio, I give you the lead, and I hope everybody enjoys.
All right. Well, thank you, Maria Vittoria. Let me know if you're seeing my screen. And I will appreciate, you guys are all muted because there's quite a few people and we can't really have a sort of a chit-chat conversation at this point. But we'll appreciate if you tell us where you're coming from, where you're connecting from, and maybe if you can put your audio, sorry, your video. It's nice to see faces. I will be losing you because I'm presenting, but I hope the second part where Maria Vittoria speak, I will enjoy a little bit more of the interaction with you. So we are talking about Palladio in Venice, and it's kind of unique because when we started this series of events, what, 2 months ago, you know, we basically pretty much said that Palladio was based in Vicenza, everything was done over there, but that actually the last 10 years of his career, more or less, are actually spent in Venice, that although are only 10 out of 72, just to give you a reference, Palladio was born in 1508 and died in 1580, so 72 years. Those period in Venice, also because of what was Venice, gave him the prestige and the exposure that is the audio okay? I don't see text or messages, so please stop me if there's anything that I need to correct them. Just to give you a little recap, in the very first seminar, we talk about Palladio and his quarry, because it's basically the same stone that we are working nowadays. And we talk about the stone cathedral, how the stone was quarried in history and how we are doing nowadays. In the second event, we discuss about Palladio, you know, we call it Jefferson meets Palladio. And we spoke a little bit more, probably a bit too much on the historical side, more than the actual architectural and the practical, which is, you know, our expertise, about the influence of Palladio in particular in the US. I know that somebody is also from outside the United States, and, you know, I apologize to them. I'm pretty much a US centered here. You know, I'm connecting from just about around New York City. In the third presentation, we talked about tasting Palladio. That's how we call it, and you know, we made a connection to wine because Palladio enjoy wine like we all do in the Veneto area, although I'm not from Veneto, and in particular because we look more at his personal life and lifestyles and a connection on how we restructure. So a couple of case history. Of actually project cases of how we built and converted two projects, again, follow Palladio's inspiration, Palladio idea. The fourth one was, again, a little bit of a sidestep because we presented the showrooms, but even with the same concept that, you know, building a new showroom, which the Grassi just virtually opened a few weeks ago, and you can see it on the website, is still a project that needs to be thought, needs to be executed and following certain procedure, like, you know, it will be a church, or it will be you know, a house, a mansion, or a high-riser. This one, you know, hopefully you will see what will be allowed. But it's Palladio in Venice. This is a little bit of a history of his works. So we see here Villa La Rotonda, the Teatro Olimpico. Again, the inside of the Teatro Olimpico, Basilica Palladiana, of course, downtown in Vicenza, Villa Malcontenta, and probably, we'll see what Giacomo is going to come up for the next event, but Malcontenta in Italians means not happy. So I'm sure there's a long story that I would like to learn. And the Villa Emo. Villa Emo, I believe we discussed that in the Jefferson episodes. Here, the focus is going to be, especially for these few slides, on the Patriarch of Aquileia, which is Daniele Barbaro. Aquileia is a small town, village, I should call it, north of Venice, still near the sea, the Adriatic Sea, but close to the border with today's Austria. And it was pretty important because back then had a very strong tie with Rome. And Rome, it has an important place in history and in architectures, first of all, because of the Pope. Rome back then was what it still is today, the Vatican State, but back then is, of course, a much higher magnitude and importance. And, of course, the Catholic and the ecclesiastical and the power that he has. Barbaro basically became what Trissino was for Palladio in Vicenza. Trissino, we saw it, he was the mentor, but at the same time, he was pretty affluent and allowed Palladio to build, first of all, to learn the trade, but at the same time, to build his masterpieces. He is the first one that took him to Rome to learn the Roman and the Greek architecture, to study all these notes that basically at the end will then be translated into 4 books of architecture, which will be printed in this period in Venice. That's why Venice is so much important. And I believe that Palladio would not be what he is today if it wasn't for the 4 books. So again, how important it is writing something. And it's about time I should start writing some books myself. Hopefully I leave some footprints in my career. Barbaro pretty much did the same thing because he was the first, he was, besides being a pretty important religious person, he was also a learner and the translator of the Vitruvian documents. And Vitruvian, I admit my ignorance, I don't really recall what it is, but I know what the Vitruvian man is. And again, we bring up to Leonardo and his man that is the perfect figures. Vitruvian was a Roman general, engineer, architecture, doctor. Back then, basically, if you only have a little bit of culture and study, you pretty much master of the science that today are diversified in many different things. So again, Palladio took Barbaro down to Rome because Palladio was already going to Rome, was already familiar with Rome. And I see here another connection in what we are still doing nowadays, which is basically, taking your client to the quarries like we're doing today. Is sort of engaging with the client in a different perspective than it is just meeting in his office. So I like this sort of, at least that's the way I'm reading. The more I'm learning about this history and I'm relearning about these things, which of course, when I was in high school, I wasn't doing with the kind of the mindset that I'm doing nowadays. But, going back to Venice, this is an historical map of the city, and just because it's historical, of course, is not as faithful as the actual one, which you see, here in the little square. Here, I mainly did it because I wanted and I needed to position the 3 main churches that Palladio did. They are not the only one. Actually, the very first religious was a smaller cloister, but I don't think it was enough important. So we have so many subjects to discuss here that, we need to decide on what to trim, but we'll do probably other event on the San Giorgio Monastery. Another important aspect that will bring us later on towards the end of my speech is this, I suppose it's here, and Maria Vittoria and Giacomo correct me, here is where the current bridge is connecting Venice to the motherland, to Mestre. This would be Mestre, and this is the bridge of Santa Lucia, I think it is. Which basically is the highway and the train that connects today. But back then, Venice were literally connected only by boat. So again, if you can see from the stars, the very first San Francesco della Vigna is this sort of a big monastery over here. San Giorgio, I think people that haven't been, even people that haven't been in Venice kind of recall or will recognize it once I'll show you the picture, is located here. And the Church of the Redeemer is located here on the Canale della Giudecca, the biggest one in Venice. So diving into the San Francesco della Vigna, the name is San Francis of the Vineyard, because you can see here the vineyards. And still nowadays, they actually produce wine, which has, of course, a limited capacity, as you can see from the size of the vineyard, but has the peculiarity of being right in the middle of the sea, because again, Venice is in the sea, so it's kind of unique. But staying on the architectural side of it, you can see the complexity of these buildings. I mean, this is the church, only this part is the church, but you have all the cloister here, the tower, the square behind, and there's so many other elements. What Palladio actually did was the facade. The church was already being built by Sansovino, and Sansovino was the proto of Venice. I'm trying to think what would be the equivalent. I mean, in Italian would be the assessore to a building. Here is probably not the mayor, but where the entity that basically supervises buildings and construction and permits. And usually these kind of figures in the municipality have an architectural background and an engineering background. So was this guy that Sansovino also, had his own committee and his own clients. And, besides his public work, he also has his private profession. So he was building. I just brought these pictures, and I apologize about the collage, but I think it's important to show what was the lavishness of the decoration and the renaissance of the Venice architecture in those ages. And again, remember, we are in the 1400s, 1500. So just before the Lutheran Reformations. So even this church was actually being built prior to the Reformation, and Palladio was coming into the pictures when things are actually changing. And I see similar connection to what is happening today. And believe me, I don't want to get into politics, but we are sort of seeing today is that we are rewriting history. I mean, some people are taking down Winston Churchill, and we spoke about Thomas Jefferson, that is the founding father, but at the same time he was traded about slaves. So I think it's difficult reviewing history with today's eyes. When things happen in the past, and we can't really live into that. But again, talking about architecture, this is the challenge that Palladio had to do. The church was started as a very lavish one, and he had to face the consequence that, hey, you gotta be very clean, very minimalistic. Think about Lutero. He went to Rome and he saw St. Peter's and the magnitude, and he say, hey, isn't this the church preaching about poverty and chastity? And look at this, what's happened. So Palladio had to do the same thing. So this is the inside of the church. And you're also facing these practical challenges, because yes, in theory, you want to be only devoted to God and nothing really matters, but at the end, money matters, and especially when we are building, money matters. So you can see all these chapels. Sorry, I didn't get all this chapel on the side had their own ornament, and of course help creating these churches. And if you can think about the churches in northern Germany, how more clean and poor they are compared to the Italian ones, you can probably understand the difference. But these churches and this chapel were actually a way of raising funds to build those projects. So it was important to sell these chapels to private donors that wanted to receive grace from God, and because of their contribution, private investor basically made the project. But Palladio challenge was primarily the facade, and again, he had to stick, of course, this, take into consideration and remember, is a remodeling of something existing, a review under a different perspective. But you still have to stick to the basics. You can't just revolutionize everything. One of the principles is the number 3, which is, of course, the Trinity in the Italian Christianity, and it was very much part in this architecture. You can see that this, and this is probably not the best picture. I should have mentioned this a little bit earlier, but if you remember the previous one, there's this big nave, which is the central part of the church, but you have this side and the other side, which is create the number 3. At the same time, here in the facade, you see the center here and the 2 sides. So again, the number 3. Even in this window, you see divided into 3 parts. So again, the Trinity is important. But this was not really the challenge. The challenge was, first of all, to keep his signature, which is, the triangle, the Greek, architectural triangle, the Corinthian or Doric, Corinthian columns. And here was primarily how to make this facade sort of resemble and is only one instead of 3 different places. So this is the way he designed it. And what is actually unique is what he did here. He created this plinth that basically seems to support the old church. And that's how he cleverly integrated the side with the center. And that's why, the picture doesn't really feature too much the 2 sides, because what's important is actually this part here. So this is first his genius, and it's very simple, like the Columbus egg. It's very simple now to know how an egg can stand, but before he did it, nobody could figure it out. Here, just to finish the the complex and give you an overview of the architecture, is really a very nice place, and sometimes it's forgotten because it's not in the typical tourist path that from the train stations goes to San Marco Square, and maybe you come back with the Vaporetto, and you gotta follow the tourist path. But it's certainly a sort of a little enclave also outside of the crowd and the mess. The second church, and that's what I'm saying, I think even people that haven't been to Venice probably recognize this is San Giorgio, and it's right in front of San Marco Square. You can see, this is the lagoon, and behind here you can see the open Adriatic Sea with the boat. That's why I think these pictures, besides the the beauty of the sunset, I think is a good way of representing. And the other thing that I want to capture in this picture, again, is the magnitude of this complex. We are not just talking about this church, which is massive, but we're talking about all this cloister, the monastery, and we'll see a little bit more in details later on. But it's important that even this big complex, that even nowadays, with today's technology, will take quite some time to be built, let alone in the 1500s. And this started actually in 1982 after Christ, is when the Doges basically gave this island to the monks. And the construction started in that period, just soon after, all the way to the 1500. And, it had this basically his ending when Napoleon came and depraved everything. But had a very important part, and it's sort of like the Porsche side of town when he had in his highlights of the time. It's sort of like the Beverly Hills of LA, or I don't know, the Upper East Side of Manhattan, or the Parioli of Rome. All the good people want to hang out in, the affluent want to hang out there, because yes, you are in town, but you're also a little bit more detached of the town. This is the same view from San Marco Square. And again, not only, it took a while, but this complex was actually almost all destroyed in 2023 by an earthquake. The importance of it is such that even the Pope, Pope Alexander III, when met Frederick Barbarossa, they met on this island. So again, the Pope don't really move to anything. They also explain the link that this island has with, the Vatican State, which was very important. And again, taking into account that the Venice Republic was already a very important state, and not necessarily the two states, really lived well together. So that gives the understanding of the importance of this monk and this congregation, that although we're belonging to a different state, they could invite the head of kind of an enemy states to meet important dignitaries there. Talking about architecture again, because this is the focus of our speech. Again, the facade, you can see here that is pretty similar to the one in San Francesco della Vigna. You can still see the four columns. You can still see the triangle that is, on top of another triangle. You can still see these plinth that are connecting all the facade. So this is a kind of his own personal signature, just like, at least this is my interpretation, like Zaha Hadid has his own curves, and I don't know, Frank Gehry has something else, and Renzo Piano something else again. I suppose everyone wants to put his own stamp on things. But, this is also, he had a little bit more luxury here. And although Palladio was always very spare and concerned about budget. Of course, like any one of us, when you have more funds available, you have also more freedom to move and to express. So it's easier also to create masterpieces. So that being said, I think what's important is also the connection. And here I think there's a part of a marketing that interconnected and made this church and this architecture pretty famous, because here we also see the Palladio involved Il Veronese. Il Veronese was a good, of course, very good paintist. I mean, a very famous painter, sorry. But I don't think he was that famous before creating this huge painting here. These are the Cana weddings. And we'll have another picture that is showing a little bit better. Here, what I wanted to show is that Palladio actually started from the refectories before he got into the church. And like I said, I mean, this is a huge master complex. Here's another example of the facade. I gotta better wrap up on time because I don't want to take too much on Maria Vittoria, but I think it's pretty nice to see this wave crashing in front of the steps of the church, and here to see the complex and also how the column and the cloister are taking the historical Renaissance architecture interpreted in the Palladian style. What I think is unique to discuss here is this painting. First of all, like I said, Veronese became who he is because of this. The size of it, those are 660 by, and I'm gonna read this, 990 cm. If somebody can please convert them into feet and inches, I would appreciate, because I can't do it off the top of my head like this. But I can tell you that this was, and probably still is, the biggest painting in Louvre. It is in Louvre because, like I said, Napoleon basically ransacked everything in Italy when he invaded. Well, it wasn't Italy back then; it was the Venice Republic. But what is also important in this painting is, first of all, again, the lavishness. You can see that the painting is not, the jackets, the fabrics, the colors, the food. It's not like, a few sandwiches and, shorts and backpack. Here are pretty important dignitaries, well dressed, and what is surrounding the background of the painting are basically Palladio architectural styles. So to me is also, and when I read it, this is also the first marketing and advertising or a brochure that we will do, the website that we will be doing nowadays. And that's basically the interaction between two different forms of art that this painting advertised the Palladio architecture, and at the same time, the Palladio architecture helped in making Il Veronese more famous. Here, other look from the cloister and from the other aspects of the church and the complex. And these are the drawings of the last church, Chiesa del Redentore, Church of the Most Holy Redeemer. This church was the last masterpiece and probably the pinnacle of Palladio career. It was towards the end, and Palladio really worked until the very last few days of his life. I don't remember basically which one, but I think he didn't even see this completed, but he really worked to everything on this. And he broke rules because, first of all, it had to be a major one because this was being commissioned to redeem Venice from the plague. And this is what I'm seeing here. There's a connection to what we are experiencing today with this COVID-19. And Venice has so many similarities with, for me, it's Manhattan. And maybe I'm reading because I'm kind of experiencing both. But if you remember the first picture where I show you the map of Venice without bridges and, kind of Manhattan, yes, Manhattan has bridges, but consider the density of the city and the complexity of the virus. That's why it's so important to, to be so careful on the spread here. And probably it's not so important to be so adamant about social distancing in Missouri. But the actual social distancing was invented here in Venice during this time. We had the plague, and if you remember, and I apologize, I wanted to put the picture here, but I think in the image of you, if you think about the Venice Carnival or the Venice Mask, you will have the image of this black face with a huge long nose. It's sort of the symbol of the Venice mask. Well, that nose was actually to protect people from the pestilence and the smell and the infection of the virus. And in those big noses were so big because you had sort of like a pipe. You had to put spices there, first of all, to protect yourself from the stink that is affecting you. People are dying on the street and there's nowhere else you can go because you are basically confined on a very tiny islands. And, you got to also protect yourself. So it's sort of what we are doing, the mask of we are doing today. Again, let me just bring back to architecture because I need to wrap up this part. Here you can see the magnitude and the importance of this church. But at the same time, this dome here and the Redeemer on top sort of has some connection also with the Middle Eastern, the minaret, I think is the translation in English. And again, Venice had a lot of connection being a republic with the Ottoman Empire. I forgot to mention, I don't remember if I said, but the 4 books of architecture were printed in Venice, but so was the Bible, and so was the Torah, and so was the Quran. And can you think of, such as anti-Catholic books like the Torah and the Quran being printed such in proximity of Rome? So that tells you also about the power of this republic, that could claim such an independence from, such an important state, which is the Vatican. Here is a procession that sort of every year, I think is in August, is probably the major feast in Venice, happen every year and sort of basically to bless the city from this plague. And it's basically taken here to what we are doing today and the remodeling of the project, I believe is in LA. I wasn't much involved, so I asked Maria Vittoria to take over from here and basically step back and kind of enjoy the show at this point. Hope I recap and I did everything. Maria Vittoria, can you take it from here?
Thank you so much. Let me just try to share my screen right now. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, here we are. So basically, we were talking about, how Palladio was restoring his old things. Of course, what we did here is a different project, it's a new project. But anyway, I want to talk about how we, as always, Grassi Pietra working for project this was involved in this special renovation. As Giorgio was saying, this project is in California, is actually in Anaheim, so in Orange County. And the church was designed by Philip Johnson, who is a postmodern architect, that was opened basically in 1981. And that was made for a congregation, for a church whose main priest was Robert Schulter. And he did this really nice outside of the church. He was a person who was used to stay a lot on the television. And that's why he asked Philip Johnson at the time to use a lot of glass. That's why, I mean, that was so special as a construction that, I mean, definitely the congregation took the name of Crystal Cathedral and, you know, basically the Church of the Crystal Cathedral. It was a big piece of architecture in the area, and again, it was opened in 1981. The church then went basically bankruptcy in 2010, and it ended up after 4 years to be sold to the Church of Rome, and they bought it and they took in their hand the renovation of this project. But I want to talk about that because we were really involved since the early beginning in this project. That was really something special, not just for our company, but more for myself. I mean, we are small, we are always a part of this really nice project. And when we get to the project, we really get involved to the request of our clients. We try to understand what they want, the requests that they have, and we try to give them solution. Of course, as Giorgio was saying, budget is always an issue. Technical characteristics are always an issue, but what was more important, we always try to remember that architecture is something that connects the people to the use that they have to do. So we try really to understand what's the need for the people, and we try to comply to their requests. Basically, the first time that I bumped into this cathedral, it was very, very early. I think it was one of my first travel to the USA. I think it was 2004. What happened is 2004, there was no internet. If I wanted to travel, I still went to a local agency, travel agency, and asked for an air ticket and a booking for a hotel. And it came out, I had some client in the Orange County, and so my hotel was like 5 minutes away from the cathedral. So the first day I was there, I really bumped into this construction. And it was really, I got in love with this project. I saw that it was impossible for me not to stop by and go inside and saw what it was. It was something that I've always loved to see. And so, every time that I came in California, in Los Angeles, and I had time, I always stopped by to see this fantastic project because the hand of Philip Johnson is something that you cannot miss. I mean, it's something unbelievable. And, with the time passes, we had many projects produced around that area. But after 10 years, so approximately in 2014, I think it was the church had just been sold, but I didn't know that. It was with my great pleasure that a friend of mine calls me and said, Maria Vittoria, you know what? Yesterday I was talking to an architect. They're looking for a nice gray stone, and I think your stone will be great for you. Let me just show you where we are. This is just another picture of the cathedral. This is just the outside there. And you know what? We started talking with Johnson's Spain office. Architect Chung saw the material and he really got in love with the stone. These were the first samples that we sent to him. And listen, when he took these pieces in his hand, I really understood they were perfect for the project. And I mean, there was nothing he could have done to change this one. He really got in love with that and he said they are perfect. And I still remember that he told me they were looking for a material like in the floors that recall the earth, while the glass above would recall the heavens. And that's a connection that I've always kept in the stone. So that was a great possibility for us. They needed this very simple flooring and they loved it. These were the first samples and they were directly approved by them. Of course, you know, the material is not just about color, it's about a lot about technical details, about the dimension, about, you know, decision on the thickness, on the way of using the material and how to install that. So we had the visit of the architect coming by us because, you know, one thing is to talk about a project, another thing is to perform it. You really need to comply to request of the client. And so we had him here, we brought the architect to the quarries, we selected the level of the material that we would have used. And this has taken not a zero time. I mean, a project always takes 2 years more or less to be developed completely. But anyway, you know, every time that we met with him, I was sure the material was confirmed because he really loved it. And everything was thought about starting from the color of the Grigio Alpi. There was a lot of non-written communication. I mean, about how are the things going, about, you know, small details in the architecture, in the way of settling the material. And we had him really inside our company and he brought inside us inside the project. At the end of the day, you know, 2016, 2017, it comes the moment to really supply a big samples for the church so that they can definitely approve that. At that moment, a lot of things have changed. The dimensions of the tiles were settled, the thickness were settled, and we realized the natural color of the material had some kind of course of variation, like in all natural materials. But this wouldn't have worked so well in the normal way we cut it. So, for example, in this was, as you say, there could be some kind of difference between the tiles. So we decided for them, and that's the only project where we have done that in the United States, is to cut the material on the other side. So we provided them with a basically cross-cut material, to have a material which is more blending, more than, you know, that's the result that they had. Well, they got in love with the material. And so at the end of the day, they approved everything and we started with the production. During the production, of course, we had people coming here in Italy to check that everything was going well, that there was no big, I mean, that the production was as we wanted. And also, you know, to see that we were on track and to show them everything where the material came from. We had also a long talk with a lot of people of the church directly. This is the Bishop of Los Angeles who came here. Basically, he is in love with Italy. He studied a lot of years here. We had some really nice dinner with him. And here it is with my father inside our company. That was a nice visit, which we really enjoyed here. And at the end, the material was delivered, of course, in Los Angeles. We went there while they were installing that. And we are so happy to see that everything was installed very, very well. We got in touch with the architect after the installation and we, you know, they loved the result. I mean, I can't say that anything bad about that. That's just a few photos that we have taken during or immediately after the grand opening of the church. That's all. Here you see here, all this area is all our material. I just can say that the color was perfect. So when you see the final result, you can just know that that was the perfect material for the area. All this is glass. I think that's the biggest church in glass in all the United States for sure. That's some other views. All this material here also is also our gray material, Grigio Alpi. This is other Italian material. And that's what you get when you enter in the church. So with a lot of this stone, which is blending and it's perfectly installed. Here we were here when they installed the material and when they opened it up. I just think that everybody is very happy. When I was here during the grand opening, I was just talking to the people and they were talking, we really love the way you worked. And that's, I mean, the best result that we can get, because at the end of the day, for us, is like, it's something that stays in our life forever. I mean, stone is not something that you do for a few days. This flooring will stay here for the next 100 years, I hope. So, you know, it's that's a great thing. That's exactly what we want to hear about that. So that was a little bit of the idea how we worked for this project. Again, all this cladding here, detail of the flooring. Again, the Baptist area. This is something a little bit different because it's that's a little bit of idea of what we did here. And I'm more or less closed with the presentation of my part. I just want to take 1 minute of your time to show you a pair of photos that has, I mean, nothing to say, nothing to do with the Crystal Cathedral, but just to introduce you to our future project that is a little bit as a project of Palladio. And I'm just talking about, this is a villa that we have here in Nanto, and this is just a few photos that we have had in here. It's a villa that we are very close to our company. It's called the Villa Barbaran, and that's a project that we are starting right now. Basically, we are restoring that. So this is just a few moments to show you about you know, what we have to do in the future, because this is a big jump that we are doing, and I just hope that you can keep tuned to help us, you know, restore this kind of villa. That's just, you know, it's like a Palladian villa that has to be made and has to be discussed and worked from now on in Italy. So keep tuned here, because I really hope that we can keep in touch and, you know, you see what will become this Villa Barbaran in a few years. I'm done here. Giorgio, I don't know if you want to talk about something.
Well, I don't know if you hear me, but I put the headphones. I forgot to do it. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, everything is fine.
I actually have a question that I swear we didn't really prepare. It's actually more for the audience than probably it is for you. But I think, you know, Palladio was so smart to involve Il Veronese in creating this painting that advertises projects. Who should we call to advertise this project and basically, you know, publicize what we are doing? Because at the end, this is also what we need to do. We can't call Veronese because it's busy doing other things. No, I don't have other things to add. Honestly, I enjoyed that part, which you know, I'm learning more. And if
just
somebody else,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's a good question. Yeah, that's a restoration project, and that's a big project we are starting. And you know, it's basically this house is close to us, and it's something which is here. We need to put their hand here on that, because otherwise it will be destroyed. And it's, you know, it will be a difficult project to do. It will cost a lot of money, but we think we own that to our background. I mean, it's a piece of story that we have here, and we don't want to have it destroyed, whatever it costs, I mean. And of course, we hope that, you know, till when the stone is sold, also in the United States or in all the world, that will be a good, it will be a good point to, you know, to.
What? Luther is dead, so we can build a few little chapel to sell to the Americans, so that we can raise the funds.
Would be a nice idea.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
No, I don't know if this maybe Giacomo. I don't know. I didn't check the chat. But if this, no.
Giacomo, I don't know if you want to unmute you. There are some new messages here. Okay, classical churches and temples. Yeah, we as a company have done a lot of classical temples. Actually, most of them are, of course, in Russia, in that area, you know. And that's something that, I mean, of course, they typically require marble more than stone. Let me see if I have some photos here for you. Let me see if I can share my screen, and that's, I might try to share my screen again.
Yeah, but we can't supply or help them with the marble too. I mean, we are starting from our stone, but, you know, like any marble trader, we can work in many different material, I believe, right, Maria Vittoria?
Yeah, sure. That's, for example, one of the churches we have done was in Russia. That's a private chapel, you know, that's the typical material that they use there. Of course, that's not, I mean, it's totally different from the cathedral, a totally different idea of architecture. It's still interesting, you know, and it's so nice because every time that you have a project, you end up making different, producing different things, and that they still blends very well with the people and the, the result that they want. And that's
I think, sorry, Maria Vittoria, sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's actually a good point that probably we have it so much engraved and we forget sometimes to advertise, so we got to learn from Palladio. We started talking about this because we own the quarry, that basically the same quarry, the Palladio, the same stone, which is 6 colors, a handful of colors. But we know that the demand of architecture goes from white to red, and because like any stone quarries, we buy blocks from many others, so we can source other material, some easier than others. But I think this is a very pertaining question that we should have probably specified a little bit earlier. So I don't think there's a request in marble that we can at least look at and I don't know, hopefully quote and do it, right?
That's always nice. And it's nice, to see that at the end of the day, the ability of performing is what you need, because technical people, at the end of the day, it's just different materials react differently, but the way of working them are really similar for us. And that's good because, starting from the Palladio times, we still have people working as sculptors till, from that till the machines that do everything around. So this is where quite complete. We don't have big problem on that one. I don't know if there are some more questions. Do you know if Maurizio Vancouver has Perla dei Berici? No, I think I don't know if he still has some Bianco Avorio. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have Perla dei Berici. But get in touch with Maurizio, we can supply him the stone, that's not a problem. If you want Timothy to send me, the quantity, I can just get in touch with, or you can call him, both of them would work, that's not a problem. No, we have not worked on Neumann churches, not. We'll be happy to have a connection if you have it. Let's go back to see what it is. Susanna said, I hope I can visit Venice again. Susan, I just hope to have you here again in our quarry. I still remember when you came here. Hope to see you again here soon. Okay.
Good.
If there is any other question, you can just unmute yourself and talk, or just write in the chat, whatever is better for you. Or, it's, otherwise I'm just going to thank Giorgio for your presentation. I just want to tell everybody that we keep this, I think every 15 days is more or less the time that WebC will work. So, keep an eye on our email, because sometimes they do go on the spam folder, but we hope to see you again in 15 days here. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed that. Let us know if you have any kind of ideas about that. Any kind of suggestion will be welcome by email. Thank you, Giorgio, so much.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Grazie mille. Ciao.
Grazie. Bye.
Ciao.